In the last section, we were able to navigate between two scenes automatically whenever a user logged into our application. Now there's just one issue that we're running into now, and that's whenever we navigate over to the employee list, we get this automatically generated blue button here placed in the header. Now of course, maybe it will make sense to eventually allow a user to go back to the login form whenever we start to implement the logout functionality. But usually logging out of an app is an option that is buried in some type of menu. At present, if this actually logged our user out, that would be a rather poor user experience because that's a rather large button on the screen that a user could very easily press accidentally. And in general, we don't really want to make it that easy for a user to log out. Because as soon as they log out, then they have to retype in their email and their password, which is always a real big hassle. So we need to figure out some way to disable this button right here. To do so, we're going to make a little bit of a change to our scene setup inside of our router. At present, you'll notice that we've got our two scenes in here, the login screen and our employee list. These two scenes form kind of two separate flows throughout our application. So let's take a look at a diagram that's going to expand on that a little bit. So up here at the top, we've got the authentication flow in our app. That has its own scene. Then on a totally separate flow, we have our employee list down here. And eventually we want a user to be able to tap on a name on that employee list and then navigate over to the employee create. Whenever a user navigates from employee list to employee create, I think that in that sense, or in that case, it would make a lot of sense to have the back button be automatically generated in the header. So in other words, if we go from this flow to this flow, we don't want to see a back button. But if we go from employee list to employee create, we probably will want to see the back button. So to set up this type of navigation structure, where in some cases we see a back button and in some cases we don't, we're going to create two new scenes in our application, inside of our router file to be specific. And these two new scenes are going to group together specific child scenes. So this would be a child scene and this would be a child scene. So we want to group these two scenes together because we expect to be able to freely navigate between them using that automatically generated back button. But this scene right here is not going to have any other scene that has easy back and forth navigation through the use of a back button. So we are going to place it nested in its own separate scene. Now, when I describe this with words, it's a little bit confusing. So let's add the code to kind of split these two scenes off into their own separate buckets of sorts, and then we'll get a better sense of what's going on. So inside of my router file, I'm going to find my login scene right here, and I'm going to wrap it with a new parent scene, like so. I'm going to make sure I give this scene a key because all the scenes we create must have a key assigned to them. And I think that this scene right here kind of describes the auth flow inside of our application. So I'm going to decide to give it a key of auth, like so. I'll then wrap the employee list inside of its own scene as well. And I'll give this one a key of main because I think this really describes the main flow throughout our application. All right, so now we've got two separate buckets of scenes. When we eventually create the employee detail component, we will place that new scene inside of here as well. So it would be something like employee detail. And so this will tell React Native Router Flux that we want to be able to easily navigate between the employee list and the employee detail. But navigation from the login over to either the employee list or the detail right here should not be quite so easy. And as I'm saying, easy to navigate or not easy to navigate, what I'm really saying is whether or not we get that automatic back button generated. So let's save this right now and just see what happens. All right, so let's save this file. I'm going to go back over to my simulator and I'll refresh. Now when I do so, you're going to immediately notice some really strange behavior. You take a look here and you'll see that we've got this extra gigantic header inside of our application. So this extra header right here has been generated simply because we added in these extra scene components. To disable this extra header in here, we can find the root scene. So here's the root scene right here. And we're going to add on a prop of hide nav bar to the root scene. That will make sure that this extra nav bar is not automatically generated just because we are nesting in some extra scenes here. So let's now refresh, and it's back to looking good. All right, let's log in for real here. So I'll say test@test.com and password, and then I'll log in. Now when I log in, you'll notice that I still have a blue button appearing up here, but this time it doesn't say please log in. Now it says employees. Well, that's kind of strange. So let's click it and see what happens. Well, when I click it, it takes me back, so to speak, to another employee list screen. So this is a little bit of weird functionality here. We can fix it up by finding our Action Creator file. So I'm going to open up my Action Creator file. Down here at the bottom, we've got our login user success callback. And you'll recall that we had said any time that we successfully log into our application, we want to automatically go to the employee list scene. Now, this is a little bit of an oddity of how React Native Router Flux works, but essentially if we want to navigate now from, let's go back to the router really quickly. If we want to navigate from this flow right here or from this bucket of scenes, rather than navigating directly into one of these child scenes, we are going to first navigate to main. So rather than going directly to employee list, we're going to navigate to main, and main is going to attempt to automatically show the first scene inside of it, which is the employee list. So long story short, in our index.js file or in the Action Creator file, rather than navigating to employee list, we're now going to navigate to main. Now I'm specifically saying main right here because that is the key that we just assigned to the new scene that we just created. So back inside the router, here's our scene with key main right here. So after we log in, try to go to this flow. This flow right here is going to attempt to show the first scene inside of it, which in this case is the employee list. So let's now test this out again and see what happens. So I will put in my email again, and I'll log in. And now we navigate over to the employee list, and we don't have any back button present. Perfect, so that's exactly what we wanted. Okay, I think that our navigation is now in a fairly good spot, so let's continue in the next video.